Have you ever had one of those moments where it feels like part of you wants to do one thing, but another part of you wants to do something else? What about if I told you that internal conflict could be one of the main reasons that your business isn't quite where you want it to be right now? And so I was introduced to something called parts work. Really what our goal is to integrate these parts so that they're on the same page. This is most powerful in business because if you can get these parts on the same page, on the same team, incredible things happen. And we've seen this with our clients, going from charging £10,000 or $10,000 for a rebrand, now winning six-figure projects. The process is quite interesting. So the first part is have you ever had one of those moments where it feels like part of you wants to do one thing, but another part of you wants to do something else? What about if I told you that internal conflict could be one of the main reasons that your business isn't quite where you want it to be right now? In today's episode of the Creative Courage podcast, I want to talk to you about something called parts work, or as it's formally known, inter-family systems. This is a type of therapy that I've been using and experimenting with that's had great impact on both my personal and my professional life in my business. And so the first thing I want to say is I'm not a qualified therapist, and this is not intended to be advice around mental health. If you are struggling with your mental health right now, then please seek professional advice. This is really just my journey and my experience of using this type of therapy that I want to share with you, because I know from speaking with hundreds of agency owners and founders of creative businesses that this is something a lot of people struggle with. So let's start with a really tangible real world example. Let's say you feel like you should be marketing yourself more. You should be putting yourself out there. You should be promoting your services. There's a feeling that you should be doing more. On the other hand, there's also a feeling that you don't want to be overly salesy and overly spammy or bother people. And so you've kind of got these two emotions that are in conflict with each other. And the metaphor that I often use is a little bit like driving a car, and you have one foot on the accelerator and one foot on the brake. And you press the accelerator for a bit and then you slam on the brakes. And then you press the accelerator for a bit and you slam on the brakes. And a lot of people are actually building their businesses and going through their lives with these kind of internal conflicts. Not about you, but it can drive me a bit crazy. It can feel like this emotional turmoil. It can feel like we're being pulled in different directions. And I've experienced this a lot recently, as I said, both in my personal life and in business. And so I was introduced to something called parts work. And the concept of parts work is that really you are not those feelings. So when we say, oh, I feel like I want to do this, but I also feel like I want to do that, really what we mean is there's a part of me that feels like it wants to do this, and another part of me that feels like I want to do that. Now, when I first heard this, I kind of thought, wow, this sounds a little bit crazy. Second time I've used that word, but like we've got all of these different multiple personalities. But actually, when I understood the process of it, and when I understood how a lot of our memories and a lot of those emotional responses are built into our subconscious brain, I started to understand how and why these emotions were being formed, but also how and why they were driving some of my behavior. So let's stick with that example, because this is literally a conversation I had with someone. So I did a LinkedIn audio event with Chris Do the other week, and I won't say who it was, just because if you weren't there, then you wouldn't have experienced this story, and I don't want to share it outside of that group. But there was a guy there that ran a business, and his initial question was, how do you get more response on LinkedIn? And I said, well, there's a few ways. He said, I just, it was working for me, and now it seems to be really dead. And so we explored some of the tactical things, but I said, what's really coming up for you? Like, what stops you? Because it sounds like right now you don't really want to bother people. And like, if they don't reply to that first message, then you don't follow up, and maybe you send a few messages, but really you don't want to be intrusive, and all of these kind of things. And we started to explore some of these feelings. So there was a part of him that knew that LinkedIn was a great platform for connecting with people. He might be able to find some clients on there. But there's another part of him that really didn't want to bother people, and that really felt salesy and spammy by sending people personalized messages. And I know this is something that comes up a lot because I hear my clients talk about it. So let's look at this through the lens of parts work. And maybe we can kind of do a little exercise as well. We'll see where we go. But the first thing we've got to acknowledge is it's not me that feels like that. There's a part of me that really wants to put myself out there more. There's a part of me that wants to be messaging people on LinkedIn, that wants to be doing all of these things. There's another part of me that feels real resistance. And often what's interesting is the pain of that is greater than the pleasure of getting a new client. So there's quite a lot of studies that have been done to show that most of us will do more to avoid pain than we will to get pleasure. And so what the research suggests, as an example, there was a paper done where people would rather prevent someone from taking money from them than they would getting more money, right? So it's like this idea that really our brain is conditioned to avoid pain and danger. And so often the drive or the emotion behind not wanting to be salesy, not wanting to be spammy and all of those things is actually a lot higher, or maybe not higher, but maybe a lot more emotionally charged than, say, the positive of knowing that you should put yourself out there. One feels really uncomfortable and one feels kind of good and nice. So we'll often let the emotion drive that is trying to avoid the discomfort. So in this instance, we've got this part of us that wants to not bother people and not be spammy, and we've got this other part of us that really knows that if we put ourselves out there more and if we start more conversations, then we're quite likely to get more clients, which means more work, more money, more of the stuff that we want to do, right? So the process that I've been taken through, my therapist, is quite interesting. So the first part is acknowledging that that's not us, that's a part of us. The second part is then understanding what that part of you is actually scared of and what that part of you actually wants. So the process is actually quite a sort of somatic process. It's not a cognitive process. We're not necessarily thinking through it. The first part is to actually get in touch with that emotion. And so what my therapist will often ask me is, where do you feel that emotion in your body? And so this is really interesting. This was the unlock for me, because I've always been a thinker, and my friends and family will vouch for that. I think a lot, and my brain is always very active. It's analyzing things all the time. And so one of the things that I've been trying to do recently is get out of my head and more into my body. And so this is a really great practice for that. So the first stage, I'll use the word stage rather than part, because then these parts things can get kind of confusing. The first stage to this is connecting with that feeling. So where do you feel that? And so the best way to getting connection with this part is to really think about doing the thing that you want to do. So really think about a time when you're about to send a message, or you're gonna put yourself out in some way, or whatever the emotion is for you, whatever the thing is that's coming up for you. Think about a time when you're about to do that, right? And so then what you'll probably notice is that emotion. Now just notice, where in your body does that really emanate? So for me, it's kind of down near my belly button, sort of just below my ribs, in my stomach, right? And so often what can be useful is putting your hand on that part. And so let's just pause for a second, because you might think, Matt, why are we doing this? Because I didn't say at the beginning why this was so powerful. I just kind of went into the idea and the concept. Really what our goal is to integrate these parts so that they're on the same page. So instead of driving down the road with one foot on the accelerator and one foot on the brake, what we're doing is we're just hitting the accelerator or we're just hitting the brake. And so that allows us to create some real momentum in our business, and it allows us to achieve the things that we want to achieve faster, but also feeling better, right? That's the most important thing. We want to feel good about what we're doing. We want to feel aligned. We want to feel like that energy is moving us towards the thing that we want. So that's the sort of overall goal. So let's go back. Let's connect with this part. Where do we feel it in our body? And maybe just place a hand on that part of your body where you feel that emotion. And just notice, how do you feel towards that part? Now that might seem like a strange question, but it really allows you to separate from that part, because you are not that part. That is a separation from you. So how do you feel towards that emotion? How do you feel towards that part of you that is giving you that emotion right now? And the reason we ask this question is kind of twofold. Number one, so that we separate it from ourselves, but number two, so that we can ensure that there are no other parts or any other part of us that is resisting that. So if we take this part that might feel like it doesn't want to put itself out there, like it's spamming people, like it's being salesy, and we say, how do we feel towards that part? Well, maybe we're actually annoyed at it. Maybe we wish that it would just go away so that we could put ourselves out there fearlessly and not worry about what other people think. So that is actually another part of you. Okay. And so this is really interesting. This is really a really interesting dynamic. There's a book that I will put in the show notes below, a link to a book if you want to find out a little bit more about this. But the way that I've heard it described is like, imagine a room in a house. And when people come into that room, they're the parts of you. They're the different emotions that you're feeling. But when people go out of that room, there's nothing left in it. It is just the room, and that is you. So this kind of connectedness, this wholeness, this wise you that sort of knows that you could be putting yourself out there more, that you could be doing these things to build your business. You kind of know that. That's a knowing. It's not an emotion. It's not a part of you, right? So then there's a part of you that maybe is annoyed at the part of you that doesn't want to put yourself out there because it wants to put you out there more, right? And so these two parts are now in conflict. So how do you feel towards this part? We want to try and get to the place where this part that really wants to put yourself out there more and really wants to just be fearless, we could just let that part relax for a minute, because we just want to talk to the part that doesn't want to put itself out there more. Okay. And so it's like, we're just going to connect with that. This other part, we just need to ask it to relax for a second. We just need to see that if we're going to help this part that doesn't want to be put out, if we're going to get these two things on the same page, then we really need this part to just relax. Okay. And we need it to be on our side. So we're just going to actually see if we can have a bit of a dialogue with that part. Now, this feels strange. When I first did this, I was like, this feels really weird. I'm talking to myself. But what's interesting is we're actually all talking to ourselves every single day. We all have this internal narrative. We all have this voice inside of our head, which is constantly narrating our life. So we're doing this every day anyway. We might as well use it. And so I might just say to that part, for now, or for the next 10 minutes, would you mind just relaxing, just sitting back and relaxing? It's okay. It's safe. We're just going to have a conversation with this part that's really scared and it doesn't want to put itself out there. Okay. And it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, I can relax. I can let you do that. Okay, cool. So now I'm just going to connect with this part again that's really scared of putting myself out there. I'm just going to ask it, what is it really scared of? And so something might come up like, I'm really scared of people judging me. I'm really scared of bothering people. And so then I might say, okay, cool. And what happens if you bother people? Well, people might think less of me, or my brand reputation might get ruined. Okay, cool. And if your brand reputation got ruined, what would that mean? I'd mean I'd never be able to build my business again, blah, 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 etc. Right? So we're listening to it. We're engaging in that dialogue, and we're just saying, I hear you. I get how that could feel really scary if that happens. And what's interesting is a question that my therapist sometimes asks me then is, how old is that part? How do you feel that part is? And sometimes when she asks me that question, not always, but sometimes, an image will come into my mind. And I start kind of talking to this younger part of myself. And it's scared, and it's maybe a part of me that when I was at school wanted people to like me. And it was a part of me where it was afraid of what people might think, or it was afraid of the whole school not liking me. And then all of a sudden I had no friends. This is really interesting. I know we're getting quite deep here, but this is really what these parts of you are about. And so the idea here is that we're just sort of hearing this part. We're opening up the dialogue rather than resisting it, and rather than having these two internal parts of ourselves headbutting against each other. We're listening to them both, and we're realizing that we aren't those parts. We aren't those emotions. These are just parts of us that have been formed, usually at a younger age. And usually we created beliefs, usually created meanings, and our brain at that time wasn't able really to process that emotion in any other way. That was the meaning that we created. And so it kind of got programmed into our subconscious that that's what life meant. And if we do X, then we're going to get Y, and bad things are going to happen. And so it was like our protection mechanism, basically. So let's go back. So we're having a conversation with this part. What is it scared of? And we just want to hear it. And we just want to be empathetic with it. We want to really understand how that could be really scary for that part, right? If we lost our whole business, if nobody liked us, all of those things, right? Just asking it, okay, what does it need from us? What does it need in order to feel safe? What does it need in order to be okay messaging people and putting things out, etc., etc.? What does it need? And it might tell us a few things. Now, the final part of the process, which I find really interesting, is what my therapist calls updating that part. And so updating that part is really about showing that part of you, showing that younger version of you, what your life is really like now, and bringing it to the modern world. So sometimes I imagine asking it, and I say, hey, can you see me? Can you see what's going on in my life right now? Can you see the things that I've built in my business? Can you see the people that I know? Can you see the relationships that I have? And very often it can't. It's like trapped in this sort of dark corner where it's really worried about everybody hating us and our brand collapsing and all of these things. And so sometimes when we bring it into the light and we update it and we bring it to the modern world, it relaxes because it sees that, oh, actually, you're quite good at building relationships, and you've got friends, and you've got partnerships, and you've got all of these things that you've built. Maybe it's okay. Maybe I can relax a bit. And what I need from you, what it might say is, I just need you to check in with me when I'm scared. I just need you to connect with me and see me, right? And then we might take the other part and we might say, okay, what do you need? And we might have that same dialogue. One of the things that I really find useful is to almost imagine those parts in my hands. So each one of my hands. And so this part over here might be the scared me. And this part over here might be the version of me that really wants to put itself out there more. And I imagine just kind of holding them in each of my hands and talking to them. And then say, like, what do you want? And often what's interesting is they're trying to protect me from the same thing, right? So they're trying to protect me from failure, or they're trying to protect me from rejection, or they're trying to protect me from something. And so I asked them, how could they work together in order to get that thing? And I almost imagine bringing them together and integrating them, and bringing my hands together and integrating them so that they are on the same team and that they're on the same page. And this can be a really powerful exercise. And then sometimes I just imagine sort of bringing them into my chest and integrating them. And then all of a sudden, this feeling of conflict dissipates and dissolves. So I just wanted to share that with you, because I know that there's a lot of people who are listening to this that will have experienced this at some point in their life or business. And this can work for personal and business, but this is most powerful in business, because if you can get these parts on the same page, on the same team, playing together towards the same outcome, and you remove those internal blockers, incredible things happen. And we've seen this with our clients, going from charging £10,000 or $10,000 for a rebrand, now winning six-figure projects, from feeling like they have to say yes to everything that comes because they're too afraid to upset anyone, to being confident saying no to the wrong fit clients, and just having a small number of really awesome clients that pay them really well. Having the courage to let go of a member of staff that wasn't really a good fit for the team, or that they didn't really want on their team. All of these things, all of these decisions that we have that are difficult decisions that we're all going to face in our business, often working with these parts where there's some resistance can really help. So if you want to find out more about this concept, there's a few places you can go. You can Google something called interfamily systems, which is the kind of psychological therapeutic term for it, or parts work. What's also kind of aligned to this is the shadow work. So Carl Jung's shadow, if you type in shadow work, this is very kind of similar, and it works with parts of you. Your shadow is a part of you. The other thing that's been really helpful for me on this journey is reading books like The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. So the power of now is about presence, essentially. It's about the concept that there is no past, there is no future, there is only now. And so it sounds very philosophical, but it actually is quite practical. And that helps me because it allows me to observe the emotions. The problem is when we get what's called integrated with those emotions. We believe that that emotion is who we are. And we say things like, I'm angry, I'm scared, I'm feeling the emotion. And it's like, well, you're not really. Like, you're Matt, you're Tom, you're James. That emotion is coming up right now for you. And if you can learn to disassociate with that, which is not the same as burying it and pushing it away. Disassociation is about realizing that you are the observer and that emotion is a part of you, and that emotion is separate to you. So you are not your thoughts, you are not your feelings. Once you start to realize that, you can be present and you can make decisions and show up. Your way of being in business can be very powerful because it's coming from this kind of place of higher connectedness. I often talk about like our higher self. And it's a feeling that you've probably all experienced. You've probably all experienced this feeling of flow where you're not really thinking, you're not really feeling, you're just doing, and you're sort of in flow, you're experiencing the now. Maybe the air almost feels like it's got a bit of an energy. And that's our kind of true essence. That's who we are without our thoughts, without our emotions. And so that really helps me between these kind of therapeutic sessions. That really helps me to be aware of these parts and not get enmeshed with them and not kind of get integrated with them so that they're driving my decisions and my behavior. I'm going to pause it there. I hope you found this episode insightful. I hope you found it interesting, even if you didn't actually go through that process and work with your parts. Hopefully, even the concept of that might just allow you to think in a slightly different way, and just see if you can notice throughout the day when these feelings come up, if you can just imagine that rather than that just being a feeling that you have, imagine that's a part of you. And that's a part of you expressing itself because something's happened. And just see if you can see your emotions and your thoughts as kind of separate and just observe them. And that in itself alone will be really, really powerful for you. If you found this episode useful, please share it with a friend. And as always, don't forget, hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast player. See you soon.